And during her time with us, it would be fair to say that Louise has done, and I think you'll all agree with me, she's done absolutely amazing work.
Thank you.
And you were the faculty's first director for the FLAS Office for Undergraduate Research. And Louise has made absolutely outstanding contributions to teaching and learning. And she's been recognised several times in the Student-Led Teaching Awards. In fact, I think she's been recognised every time. And that includes winning the Inspirational Teaching Award and Personal Tutor of the Year Award, amongst multiple other award nominations throughout the years. And she's also been an integral part of the university's project working on closing the BAME awarding gap, which I know you don't like us calling it that. We haven't found a better title, haven't we?
Figure one out.
Yeah. But I actually came to know Louise before I met her, because Mark, who was the PVC at the time, he said to me that you were an absolute rising star and I really should get to know you. And he was absolutely right. I also came to know you through students, because the students in the student union said to me, "Have you met Louise? She's amazing." and they were right. And then Louise actually came and met me. She sat down in my office and told me a bit about, particularly you told me about the autobiographical work that you were doing. And I said to her at the end, "Well, when are you going to be a professor?" And she goes, "Oh, I don't know, 5 years? Oh, I don't know if I'm ready." And I looked at her and I thought, there is this absolutely amazing talent, and she doesn't believe in herself. And I'm really glad, actually, that people have really encouraged you to do it, because they were absolutely right to, Louise. And you need to know that, because I think it's easy for us all to actually think we're not ready. And you were ready then, and you certainly were ready when you got it.
Thank you. Thank you. I really, really.
Now, today you're going to hear from Louise about her amazing work actually in sociology and also autobiographical research collaborations, and particularly with her students. And that's led to 3 publications and actually international reach. And so without further ado, could you put a massive warm welcome to Professor Louise Owusu-Kwarteng.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you. I've got to sort of hold it together and try not to cry. But, we got this. Okay, so thank you all so much for being here with me tonight. I honestly, when Suzanne showed me the guest list of people who'd signed up and everything, I was just like, whoa, this is a lot of people. So, I really, really appreciate it. I mean, I know that you could have been out watching football, but England isn't playing tonight. Ghana, thanks to Uruguay, is not playing tonight. And there's no shade there at all. Not really. Anyway, all right. So my inaugural lecture is called "The Power of Multiple Stories," and it is using autobiographies to kind of help student success, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. So what I will talk to you about is, I'm going to learn to use this clicker. It's not working. You said it would work.
Let's test.
No. Anyway, so what I'll do is I'll explain what autobiography is, and I'll make reference to one of the people that really mentored me through this, Professor Gabriel Hall. And then I'll also kind of talk about how autobiography can be used to center people's voices, and particularly those from the margins. So I'll make reference to some people who have done it from the Global South, who've been working in this area. And then I'll kind of talk to you a little bit about my own journey into autobiography and how I did. So the strange stuff. I know my sister's online here and I don't want her to say anything. But, she says I was a naughty child. But anyway, but the role of my family and the fact that, using that to bring me to where I'm at the moment. And then I'm going to talk about students and how I've been working with students to develop this autobiographical work further. Some of my students are with me now, so thank you. Hello, thank you. Okay, so what is sociological autobiography? So effectively what it is that you are writing your story about yourself, all right? So it's part of that, but then it's also drawing in other people's stories as well, because I think your stories are influenced by other people, but it is about you, but it's the others have an impact here. So as Professor Gail Leatherby says, she says that when writing about others, but then also kind of like recognizing our own autobiographies. This is why we call it, why we have the slash in autobiography, because it's the auto with you, and then the biography is including other people. So there is effectively that slippage between the two. So I mean, I kind of draw on my own work as an example. So very recently, I published a piece on experiences in Black hairdressers. Okay, so this is my story. I kind of talked about the issues, shall we say, of going there, and you know, if you go there on a Saturday, you can come out next Saturday. It's not just my, it's not, you know, it's not just my story, but it's also the story of the people that are doing my hair, if they ever do it, and then, you know, many other Black women we know. If you know, you know, you know. So this is an example of autobiography. So that's my story, but then also their stories as well. Okay, so autobiography. It's also the kind of telling of aspects of other people's stories. So effectively, it can be used as a kind of genre as well. It can be used as a genre. So when I say this, it means that there's many different ways of telling a story. So for example, I mean, you don't just necessarily have to write a paper and you know, get it published. In our student conferences, we've done quite a few of them, which I'll come to in a minute. But some of our students kind of told their stories in different ways. So some did spoken word. Melissa Baptiste, she did a spoken word about her experience as a Black woman who was also from a working class background, and how this impacted on her working and education experiences. But then also there was another one, Heloise, who did a fantastic piece. It was really, really engaging, but it was just pictures. So it's pictures of her grandparents and pictures of how, you know, different stages of their lives and how that shaped who she was and how it shaped her identity. So it's really, really fantastic work, and I'm very proud of them as well. So, you know, these students weren't just sociology students, but they were in another faculty. They were in education and community studies. So it spans across. Okay. So Lola as well, she's another sort of sociologist / autobiographist. She also says that it's a good way of kind of navigating our identities and how it shapes who we are on a day-to-day basis. So our stories do shape us, okay? What we say about ourselves, how we put it out there is very, very informative in terms of shaping our identities. So again, I'm going to refer to two of our students, past and present. So Esla. Now, Esla, I'm again really, really proud of Esla, because Esla, she got in through the pandemic. She didn't get enough grades to get in initially, but she got through clearing, and you know, she got in. She did very well last year, and then this year she got the highest grade for the sociology and psychology students. So I was really pleased for her for that. But she wrote her autobiography as being a sort of Black generation Z female. So imagine she was growing up under the pandemic, when there was a lot of time to kind of look online and just to be looking at Instagram the whole time and stuff, and then you're seeing all of these images. So she talked about how that affected her, and then how she had to step back from it and then just learn to love herself. So she did quite a lot of self-love. So that kind of shaped her identity. That changed the way she began to see herself. So now she's a lot more confident in who she is. And then there was Gabriel Hall, and I think he's listening on, well, they're listening on at the moment. Now, Gabriel did a fantastic piece called Drag and Me. So they were involved in the drag culture. They did lots of different shows, and they presented about this at the conference. I think it was our second or third biographical conference in 2019. So they talked about how they got into drag and what it meant to their identities. So I've actually got a picture of them. So this is Gabriel at the bottom, and I think they look fantastic. I did actually ask them where they got the dress from, but they wouldn't tell me. Expensive. But anyway, Gabriel didn't just speak about it here. We went to a conference at the University of York. It was an identities conference. And for those of you who know Stuart as a sociologist, Stuart Hall, his wife was there, and she really kind of, really repped his paper. She was very, very impressed about it, and she spoke about it on different in different parts. And then also Gabriel went on to do a master's at LSE in gender and sexuality. And they're also looking at going on to do a PhD in this area. So this is how their autobiographical journey, their identities, what we did here has carried on through to what they're doing next. So very, very proud of them, very proud of them. Okay, so with autobiography, particularly sociological autobiography, there is a connection between this idea of the personal being the political. Okay, so this idea sort of came about in the late 1960s, and it was part of the feminist movement. And the connection is the way that, for example, they're talking with the personal being the political is that connection between where we are on the social hierarchies in society. So, for example, if you belong to, say, a marginalized group, so if you're a woman, or if you are from a working class background, or if you're from a Black and minority group, or you have a disability, etc., you may be in a very different position to, say, somebody who's a white upper class male. Okay, so it's a very different, so, Boris Johnson's experience is very different to, say, mine. Anyway, so arguably this also has an impact on how your access to power and the power relations in society, which then also has an effect on the way that stories are told, or if they're even told at all. Okay, so I'm just taking Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle's in the news, I'd like to say recently, but she's there every day. She's there all the time. And she's in the upper echelons of society. She is now royalty. But if you just take The Sun and the Daily Mail and many other interesting facets of the media, the way they will talk about her, it's not great. Okay, and I'm not mentioning any names, but Piers Morgan. He's one of the shall we say, one of the arbitrators of these kind of ideas. And when you look on Facebook or you look on Twitter or whatever, they'll say all these things about her. But the reality is that it's because she's Black, okay, and it's because she's a woman, okay. So the story that she tells will be distorted for these reasons. Not all people do defend her, don't get me wrong, but there's a groundswell, and then tomorrow she's releasing the next thing, isn't she? So that will be interesting. The backlash, there's going to be backlash. But let's turn this to be positive, on a more positive aspect. So Armin and Govindan, they are two global South sociological autobiographies and biographers, and what they said was that actually what we can do is that we can actually use this approach to center the stories of people from marginalized groups. So they've done quite a lot of work with women from Southeast Asia, South Africa. So they've put together an autobiographical series. But an example of what I mean is Dr. Buchi Emecheta. So she is a Nigerian, well, she was a Nigerian British sociologist. Sadly, she died 4 years ago. But what she did was she wrote a number of autobiographies about her life moving from Nigeria to the UK and how she faced racism, how she faced classism, how she faced sexism. she was also in a very, very abusive marriage, and she had 5 children, but she had to leave. And then she talks about her having tried to find accommodation, but then how her life goes on. But I think she was a goldsmith. She was teaching at goldsmiths for a while. But what's very interesting, even though her story is really sad, but what's really interesting, it's an example of how one story can be really impactful on other people's, because it also tells the stories of other people as well. Because, for example, many Black people that were settling in the UK during the 1960s had very, very similar experiences. I know my parents did. My parents settled in Nottingham, and the kind of accommodation that they got at the time was just horrendous. So it speaks to a lot of other people. It speaks to a lot of people. So that's the power of a single story. There. So Ramaro Indira, again, another sort of global South sociologist based in India, she is again advocates for this method because she says that it's a move from kind of just focusing on theory, which doesn't, theory is important. Sociologists, please don't come at me. But we need it. We do need it. But then at the same time, it's not enough to be telling or understanding people's life stories. So autobiography is very helpful in this sense. And again, she just kind of she supports the idea that it can be very useful in terms of understanding the experiences and decentering, or should I say centering, the experience of marginalized people. But then not just that, I think also, I agree with her when she says that it's also a very helpful way of allowing injustices and inequalities. So if you hear enough autobiographies about a particular issue, then this could be a very useful way to challenge those inequalities, to highlight them. Okay, so in a sense, this is what I want to be doing with students. I will talk about this in a while, but with the student stories project that I want to do, I want to be just kind of centering students' experiences, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds. Using this, here we go. Move. Okay. So this is where I start to talk about my own experience, okay? And if my family are here, I would like them to be quiet. Ebony, you're all right. Good. Just be quiet. So, how did I become a storyteller? So, my parents migrated from Ghana during the 1960s. And they brought with them that thing, storytelling, the talent of storytelling. So we do love a good story. If you're Ghanaian, you know that you can't have a simple sentence. There's always a story behind it, right? And it's told in lots of different ways. So it could be through oral histories. It could be through autobiographies, and it could also be through high life music as well. So a couple of weeks ago, it would have been a month ago now. So I did a highlight podcast with someone called Professor Louise Owusu. Now this one is a legit guy. He's legit, not like the one that did the economy. Just putting that out there. He's all right. Anyway, so we talked about this. We talked about how in many cases high life music does tend to sort of tell you a story about a particular person or through proverbs, etc. And this kind of links to this Adinkra symbol. So this is a symbol that's kind of representative of our culture. And what it says here is that whoever does not know can know from learning, and you can learn through the stories. You can learn through the music. And this was an approach that was used prior to the colonial era, but then still sort of carries on now. And I think it's really helpful. I mean, this is how I've learned a lot of things. Right. So my journeys, so from farmers to philosophies. So it's through storytelling. So the kind of storytelling that my mum and my dad did, is that I learned things about myself and about issues that affected our family. And one of these things was around education. So this is why I think many of us in the family, including my niece, I'm not pointing her out, Ebony. Anyway, but this is why we're sort of driven in a sense to kind of achieve, but then also make sure that others achieve with us. So my PhD, so as Jane was saying, I finished PhD in 2010. And it was cool. And basically what I was doing was I was kind of looking at the role of our parents within academic and professional attainment. So how did that impact that? And a lot of the people that I was talking to, they were saying that their parents were very sort of like driving them, just telling them that they've got to do well because they were doing things that they had the opportunities that they didn't necessarily have. So in that sense, when people were telling me their stories, I thought, gosh, this sounds just like us. This sounds just like me. So that made me think, okay, well, let me just write this part of the story into my PhD. So then I needed to dig a bit deeper for that. So I did. So I went to Ghana in 2008, and I did some interviews with my maternal family, and that was a very, very interesting and disgraceful experience, because I just thought, okay, let me be respectful. Let me try and speak to them in our language. And I tried, and my great uncle was just sat in the corner, and he was just kind of like looking at me. He's just like, and I was just like, well, why is he doing that? And then he just said to my dad, he said, oh, I don't understand what she's saying. So then, I tried speaking in English, and then he goes, what's she talking about? And then, my dad he was having a good time, just sitting there, just like watching me die. Anyway, but I was just like, okay, let me just let my dad be the translator. Good half an hour, but anyway, it's fine. I'm still here. So these are my grandmothers, okay? And I'm going to try not to get emotional as I kind of talk about them. But anyway, this is my maternal grandmother. She's called Nana Elizabeth. Well, she was called Nana Elizabeth Baye. And this is my paternal grandmother, and I was named after her. Her name is called Nana Amarusia. His birthday is coming up, Christmas Day. But anyway, so they were two sort of like very, very fierce Ashanti market traders. My grandma, both of them had farms. They were farmers. And basically, when I went to Ghana, I heard the story about my maternal grandmother. And apparently what she did was she said to my mum, my mum and her four brothers, she said, look, I can't read, I can't write, I can't speak any English. So you lot are all going to school. Okay, you're all going to school. Now, you got to imagine, so this was Ghana in the 1950s, where they didn't really sort of like send women to school. But she said to my mum that you're going. So, all of them went to school, and they were all sort of educated. So they did really, really well. And then they set things for the next generation. All of my mum's siblings, they had careers and stuff. And then there are things for the next generation, which I'll explain in a minute. But they were, both of my grandmothers, they were real pioneers of change, and I think if not for them, we wouldn't be where we're at the moment, frankly, So, yeah. So then there was also my dad's story. So this picture is also of, like, so this is my mum and dad getting married. I think this was their Catholic wedding in Nottingham in 1969. But all of these people were the first generation of Ghanaians who came here during the 1960s. Okay, so my dad was looking quite stush, and so did my mum, looking very, very beautiful. So anyway, so that's that generation. Sadly, my mum and dad are the only people alive left on that picture, which is just like. Anyway, so as I said, they came here in the 1960s, and when on the day that I got the letter confirming that I'd become a professor, so I had to send a message to the family WhatsApp group. Every now and again I have to do that just to remind my family that I'm not a liability. They forget. Anyway, so I sent a message, and then I called home, and I spoke to my dad and stuff like that, and then he went quiet on the other end of the phone. And I think there's a bit of emotion going on there and stuff. 90-year-old African men don't do emotion, but he went quiet. Okay, so I was like, okay. And then he said, this is all I've ever wanted for you. This is all I've ever wanted for you. I want you and your siblings to be close, but I want you to do well. So this is what I want. So then he went on to tell me this story about what happened with my brothers and my sister. So I have two brothers and one sister. And my brothers and my sister were sort of like in the school in the late 70s, early 80s. And at that time, there was a lot of racism in the education system. There is, sadly, it continues, but then it was really blatant. And they were doing, there were CSEs, which kind of limited your opportunities, but then there was also O-levels where, you know, people went on to university, and they were just putting a lot of Black and minority ethnic kids in for CSEs. So my dad was like, I'm not having this. My mum and dad were like, we're not having this and stuff. So my dad had to go up to school. They didn't listen. So then he had to bring the bishop involved, the bishop of Nottingham. They had to bring in, he had to bring in a writer called Stan Middleton. Those of you who do English may know of him. But eventually all three of them managed to kind of like get my brother and my sister onto doing O-levels. But I think these stories that I've heard obviously have shaped our lives. They've shaped our lives because I think in our generation, you can see how, you know, people have done really well for themselves. My younger brother, you know, he works in probation. My sister has just won an award for sort of like being an amazing lead midwife in West Midlands and stuff. So very proud of her for that. You know, my brother's a biochemist. In the next generation, we have Ebony and her brothers, and, you know, like Ebony is a sociologist. And then, you know, we have her brother who's kind of like aspiring to be the prime minister, which be better than what we've got. And then their younger brother who wants to be an England coach. But I've said to him that he needs to start with Nottingham Forest. So we're thinking again. Anyway, so, and he's a strange child. Okay, so this was me in 1978. Okay, so I was a little chubby 3-year-old, because I mean, you can't really see it, but I didn't have any knees. And this poncho, me and this poncho, we were just kind of joined. I love this poncho. I had a black one, but like this one was the best one. Anyway, so I always had a really strong imagination as a child. And, you know, I learned things in a very different way. So for example, the way I learned the alphabet, I learned it through color. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't question it. But then later on, I found out that I've got grapheme. I've tried to say the word grapheme synesthesia. Okay, I think that's synesthesia. So that's where you associate words and letters with colors. So that's how I. And then also, like, I used to write as well. So I used to like had all these really odd shapes, but this was my writing, and I was really proud of it. I remember my dad sort of like saying, okay, well, you got to write a letter to your uncle in Ghana. So I wrote my shapes, and he was just like, oh, he sent it. But, you know, I thought it was good. Anyway, yeah. So, but these shapes were my stories. These were my stories. I mean, they made sense to me. I thought, yeah. Anyway, so then in 1980, I went to primary school. And again, you know, obviously my writing had gotten a little bit better. And I had a fantastic primary school teacher called Miss Foley. I hope she's still alive. But anyway, so Miss Foley, she always used to say to me, just you write really well, so just keep writing. So she entered 2 of my stories for these local competitions, and I won them. So I was really pleased about that and everything. And I had a reading age above other people. I think when I was 5, I had a reading age of sort of like an 8 or a 9-year-old. So that was definitely my strength. And then interestingly, I found my school report from when I was 6. And it says that Louise enjoys creative writing and she'll choose it over number word. And she's absolutely right. I hate it. Anyway, so this kind of like continued. You know, I was really good at writing and stuff. And then in 1991, I took my GCSEs. And yeah, like I was told by my parents that I had to do science because I think they were hoping that I'd become some sort of medical doctor. And I was just like, you know, if you're African, you have 3 choices of a career. You can be a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. Yeah. Anyway, so I did the sciences. I got some beautiful fails. You know, the grades were unspeakably bad. So my dad just looked at them and he just goes, you got to do these again. And I was just like, you don't want to know what was running through my mind when he said that. You know, the language was unspeakable. Anyway, But I did it and I failed them again. And I'm going to admit something, I kind of failed them on purpose. I just didn't want to do it. Anyway, but then the good thing was that I was able to do sociology. I was able to do sociology as a GCSE, which was great because it allowed me to write about things that I cared about. Okay, so, you know, for example, social inequalities, racism. So I did a project on, you know, my parents' experience of moving to the UK, and I interviewed them and a lot of the people on that picture. So I really enjoyed that. And then I got to sort of do that at A level, at degree level, and then obviously my PhD. So it's good, it's good. It's allowed me to write, and in so doing, it's allowed me to kind of like include my stories and stories of other people, okay? So I'm gonna move past the epic fails and then skip to 2005. So when I came here, I was a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, no wrinkles. Okay, I was 30. I was just like, yeah, the world is at my feet. I was so happy. Incidentally, this is the first room that I'd ever done a lecture in. So it's full circle. Anyway, so I taught this course called Self in Society. It used to be called Investigating the Person in Society and Culture, but, you know, it changed. And then one of the things that I got the students to do was to write, because it's self in society, I got them to write an autobiography about an aspect of this experience. And it had to be about something that they felt comfortable with. I didn't want people writing things about, you know, that's going to make them feel really uncomfortable. So it basically, this approach was good because it allows particularly students from kind of marginalized groups to be able to just kind of explore who they are and engage with the work and that. I mean, I know some of my students, I'm not pointing them out, but they've done it on the third row. Yeah, so they've done it, but it also tells the story of students of marginalized backgrounds. And then what we did was we kind of took it to another level. So as Jane was saying, I was the first leader for the Office of Undergraduate Research in the university. And Tracy, I'm not calling names, but Tracy, well, again, another one of my fantastic mentors, can't thank her enough. But anyway, so she gave me the responsibility of creating a student environment for the research excellence framework. So through that, I got to do some really interesting work with my students. So we co-created and developed some conferences. So in 2017, I think this was timely, but kind of sad. So some of our students did some reflections of living in an area where people voted predominantly to remain in the EU. No, actually, they voted to leave, but they were the few that voted to remain. So I think in one place in Essex, it was like 81% to leave, and one person had voted to remain, and she was half Turkish, which added another interesting dimension. Anyway, and then the second one, living and learning, exploring educational experiences. So again, this was really great because we had home students and then international students sharing their experiences. And then in 2019, Living Our Best Lives, again, we had students, not just within sociology, but from across the faculty and across the university participating in that. And the same one was the 2018 one. And then last year, Sophie was involved in this one, weren't you? Living Our, Remove Perseverance Under the Pandemic. So we did this one online. Ebony also gave a paper. So it was good. It was a university one, but then also it was national, it was cross-faculty, and we had some people from the University of Protestant University of Berlin in Germany. We also put together 3 autobiographical pieces, so just 2 of them here, Living Our Best Lives, and then We Move, and then we had another one, I can't remember what it's called, it's terrible, I should remember. The Personal is Political, so that was the 3rd one. And then also we did a couple of podcasts. So Ryan was a sociology student, and he talked about his experience of coming out. It was really beautiful, this podcast was, because he read a letter that he'd written to his parents about coming out as a young gay man. And then he just kind of talked about that, and then we had a sort of discussion, question and answer afterwards. I mean, and then Ryan has also gone on and done his master's in genders and sexuality at Brookes College, so he's just finished this year, really, and he did his dissertation on on a very similar area. And then Seniha, so she kind of talked about being Cypriot, Turkish, female, and a Muslim. Now, for her, that was very interesting because she was born in Cyprus and then she came here. And then, like, you know, she'd have a lot of issues with her language because people would tell her that she couldn't speak English properly. And it was fine. But then also they were saying that she couldn't speak Cypriot properly. So she was just like, well, you know, so this led to a lot of questions about her identity. But it was again, two really interesting podcasts there. So then, this is bringing me to 2023, we're 2022, 2023. So we have just developed a new student success strategy, which is aimed at making sure that, again, you know, that our students come here, that they have a really good time, but then also develop personally, academically, you know, through personalized curriculums, through identifying what's going to be good for them, the kind of careers that they want to do. So one thing I want to do with the student stories is to develop a project. Okay, so I'm going to start this after Christmas. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking to students about their experiences before they came to university, while they're here, and then, you know, where they see the future. And in so doing, what I really want to do is I want to be able to just to kind of use this to inform policies and how we do things, because we have a lot of data. And I think that's really, I mean, I know I don't like maths, but like, you know, it's really important to have this data. But as someone said the other day, that is, we need to know what's going on behind the data. We need to understand why things are happening, why people are having particular experiences. So this is what my goal is going to be for this coming year. So I'm not looking at anybody, any students. You might get a call. All right. So, and then I went international. I couldn't keep it in. I had to spread my wings. So when I was the leader for the Office of Undergraduate Research, I kind of built connections with the Council of Undergraduate Research, which is based in America, but it's an international organization. And what we were doing here, every year I would go to a conference and present on some of the work and share good practice on some of the work that I'd been doing around autobiography. So I shared that. And then, you know, they learned from me and I learned from them, which was really good. And then last year, I made a connection with the Protestant University of Berlin. So some of the students came to present at the conference that we did, We Move, and they also contributed to the autobiographical series. So that was really engaging. Actually, the person that I connected with, I actually met her for the first time on Friday because I went to another autobiography conference and she was there. So it was so lovely to meet her, and you know, so she was great. And then also with World Class Day. So this is an international conference. It's a student conference. I work with colleagues in India, in Canada, also in Ecuador as well, and then there's me. So we hosted it last year, and all students from all different parts of the world came to contribute on their research. And Sophie, you did it last year, didn't you? You know, so she did it, and she did a really interesting blog on being a mother and a student as well, and they really liked that. So, and we had students from other faculties, from the business faculties and from psychology contributed as well. So get used to using names. So I just want to leave you with some concluding thoughts and, you know, coming back to my African roots, okay? So there's this saying, it says, until the lions have their historians, tales of the hunt shall be those of the hunter. Basically, I'm telling you to tell your own story because otherwise someone else will tell your story. And we've seen what happened to Meghan Markle, okay? So, you know, our stories should be told by us, all right? So remember that. And then the other thing as well, I hear this has come from another High Life tune. I hear my dad say it a lot. Little raindrops make a mighty river. So though it might be one story, okay, it might be that of many other people. We've seen this with Buchi Macheta. You know, we've even seen that we were talking about this yesterday in our education class as well, how it might be one story, one student, but then it's also relatable to so many other students as well. So I think that's really, really important. And also it's the meanings that are associated with these stories as well, because like, even if you can't relate to the experience, the meaning might, really grasp, really rock you. So take them. That's what I'd like to leave with you with. And I'd just like to say thank you all very much. Before you, Christian, can I just say, I've got to sort of like thank a lot of people here and stuff. So again, thank you all for coming, but like I have to really thank you, Casey, because I'm sorry I'm going to embarrass you, but I have to because I just remember that first conversation that you had, and I said that I wanted to become a professor, and you said to me, I've got your back, and you've always had my back. So
okay, well, it's a real pleasure for me to be here today to hear Louise give her inaugural lecture and to chair the questions and answer sessions. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of points which she talked about for me, which really resonated. And it was the importance of how individual stories become collective stories. So, individually, talks about the hairdressing experience, but we could all relate, and there's lots of shared stories which come through that.
When my hair's short.
Yeah. The other thing for me was how the stories of yesteryear and your grandparents and your parents, how they've shaped your story today. So I think it's important to think about the importance of stories in how we think about our identity and belonging. So we've got about 15 minutes just to take some questions and answers and reflections before we then begin the second part of the event today, which is the celebration, which will take place in the Heritage Gallery. So I'm going to open it up to the audience, and for those of you which are on the chat as well, if you've got any questions or comments in the chat, I'll also take some time to address those to Louise as well. Thank you. So, any questions or comments? Anybody would like to kickstart? Hello, would you like to stand up and say your name right at the very back? Oh,
That's Rishi Sunak's replacement.
Oh, Prime Minister, future Prime Minister. Okay, then, thank you. So I did see another hand. Yeah, if you'd like to stand up and introduce yourself, please.
My name is Femi. I think, thank you very much for that wonderful lecture. I am over 50 years old, and I didn't realize that you could have an autobiography that comprises of many, many stories. I always thought it had to be one complete volume of work. And so that's got me thinking now, maybe I'll start to write a few more stories inspired by what I've heard tonight. So congratulations and well done.
Thank you.
Do we see it? I can't see any other hands up. Okay, if you'd like to stand up, please, and introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Kona, and I'm in Louise's class for education. And I was in Self and Society last year. And we did this autobiographical essay, and it was about my educational trip. But I focused mostly on when school started. But now listening to your story, since you were a little 3-year-old girl, so cute, up until today, it really inspired me. And I think we have another essay soon. And I'm gonna try to put more than just my institutional experience. I'm gonna put a little bit of a touch of how I had my little quirks when not liking numbers and mathematical equations and stuff like that. So thank you so much for inspiring me to make something even more than what I was initially gonna do.
Oh, no, that's okay. I mean, you always have really interesting like contributions in class anyway, so it shouldn't just be about your institution, it's about everything. Thank you.
A couple of hands, and I've got a couple of questions on the chat, but just out of interest, could those of you which are a student of Louise, current or former, if you could just stand up, please. And yeah, and I know for those, I know there's many other people who are also joining us via Zoom. So if you could just also just let me know by yes or no how many people are either a current or former student of Louise. I mean, I think it's just really wonderful, and I think it's a testament to Louise's, you know, how amazing she is and the connections that she builds with her students and her passion as well. And I think that really comes through. It came through today, but it comes through by you all coming today to share and celebrate Louise's, you know, professorial lecture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the Zoom chat, but I did see two other hands up. So Jonathan Gascoigne wants to congratulate you, and he says thank you for a special lecture and for co-chairing the University Stonewall Group this year. You didn't talk about that. You talk about citizenship work that you do for the university as well is really important. So Jonathan wants to know: are there any particular university priorities that you would like to see students and their autobiographies inform?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a few, because I think, you know, like being Associate Dean for Student Success, you see there's a lot of things and there's a lot of issues that students face. So, for example, like, you know, when they're talking about ECs, you know, I don't want to say too much, but I saw one very recently where, you know, someone was really, really struggling as a, you know, single father, and I won't say too much more of that, but like, you know, I want to hear, you know, these experiences and these stories, so that maybe we can think about, okay, well, how do we slightly adapt these processes to accommodate situations like that? So I would say, yeah, sometimes it's about those kind of like everyday policies.
Thank you. Pretty from ILD. Hi, Pretty. Pretty would like to just thank you for your lecture, and she wants to know what would be your suggestions to listeners and educators on hearing stories.
Okay, so first of all, I mean, make time. Just like, you know, even if it means that your student is sitting with you in your office and stuff, just make time for them. And then, like, you know, if for example, you're doing a project like this or anything, just say, look, would you like to participate? Because I think your story is really interesting. But the first thing is make time. And even if it's not for that, you may be just helping them just by listening to them anyway, you know. So I just think make time.
Thank you.
For good tea.
Oh, and your biscuits as well. Tea and biscuits. So I saw two hands up. Did I see Myrtle? Hi, Myrtle.
Hello. Oh my God, just seeing my two mentors, two professors, you know, so inspiring.
Who knew?
Oh, a bit emotional. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you. I mean, you thanked Tracy, you know, for having your back. I want to thank you for having my back. And I just, when you're talking about stories, and one of the things you said, you know, your family, in terms of getting educated and bringing people with you, you certainly have done that with me and other people, and I want to thank you for that. Whilst you were talking and your slides and using your own story, this is decolonization right there. Yeah, that's how I feel. And I think, you know, that influence in the classroom, and it actually shows, you know, your students being here, you know, how, you know, any student can relate to that, not just BAME students, but I can relate to what you're saying, because it's also, you're telling their story as well. And that I'd like to encourage others to kind of use that you've encouraged me to use that in my lectures.
Thank you.
In terms of teaching. And I just thinking also, when you were talking about autobiographies, what next for you in that area?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think, I mean, as I say, I want to do this. I'm going to do this student stories project from hell or high water. I'm going to do it. I think I would like to sort of work on encouraging other people within the institution, but then also outside of the institution to be doing the same, and as a way, because I think I've worked in policy making before as well, but I think I wouldn't say that it's so much like that here, that it's top down. I think people's voices do get heard, but I'd like to see more of that, and I'd like to see that happening on a broader scale. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to be a very irritating force.
Thank you. I saw one other hand and then, two other hands. Oh, can you put your hands up? I can't see. Okay, so I think we'll just take, was it 3 hands okay? Okay, we will take 3 questions here, and then we've got another couple of questions on the chat, and then I think we can start to wrap it up then, that's okay. So would you like to stand up, please, and first of all? And
hello, my name is Juanita. I think for me, this is not a question, but it's just an admiration for you, Louise. I think your popularity within, your students, with us, is not only because you're a lecturer, but you speak to us in a way that we familiarize with you a lot, just because of how warm and welcoming you are towards us. And I think a lot of lecturers can, learn from that as well. It's very I do think that you are a lecturer that will be remembered in a lot of students' lives and achievements. That you be remembered in, especially mine. So thank you so much for that.
So much.
and you'll become a part of their stories, and your picture will be up there.
Hey, Joe was teaching me how to speak tree a lot.
I saw oh, sorry. Hi, Sophie. Just stand up. Just stand up.
Again, it is more a thank you to Louise. This assignment was like one of the first ones when we started sociological, and doing that with biography helped me massively overcome mental health obstacles. It helped me as a parent, and I do find now that Louise's words echoed through me to my daughter, telling her to speak up. Her voice is powerful. Yeah. So it's not just me, it's also my children.
I've probably got a couple of questions. One is, I'm really interested in this identity project because I think it would be fantastic for first year students to help understand their own identities as a student and why they're there. And we have lots of students with confidence issues, self-esteem issues, and it feels very powerful to use this tool instead of the kind of standard, you must learn to not to plagiarize. So my question is, can I come and see how you do it? Because I can't translate in my head how you translate that into an academic activity that
I'll tell you what, I'll do you a deal, I'll come and do more. Because what it is that I don't teach that course anymore, because I moved on to, but I'll come and do one for you.
Okay, well, I'll come and talk to you and we'll see what we can
do. Sure.
And then the other thing is, talking about, I'm wondering, it's triggered a thought for me that we could use this, I guess, to look at organisational behaviour and things that are happening in organisations, and that's something that I'm interested in because I'm doing organisational psychology. So now going off in a completely different direction, thinking how I could use autobiography to help shape organisational behaviour and culture.
I think there's some research out there, isn't there, on that? But yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we'll sort something out.
Okay, we've got a few questions on the chat, so I'm going to see if I can wrap them together, or if we're not able to, then maybe you can see the questions and respond to them afterwards. Gail, I know you've got a couple of questions, but I'm going to come to you next. Come to you after this question. So the first question is by Lisa Vargo, and she says greeting from Saskatoon. Where is Saskatoon? Same thing. So and she's interested in knowing how you help in your research and teaching, and how it helps those telling stories mediate between the private power of writing stories, i.e. the lions, versus when a story becomes public and how it might become appropriated or diminished by the hunters.
That's a very good question. Yeah. DC, don't make it easy for me. Anyway, okay, so let me try it again.
So I guess, yeah, it's this balance between the private power of stories, but then the sort of the tensions and potential sort of challenges which can come once you share your stories out in public domain.
That's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, and it is a real sort of tension, but then I think it also depends on who you're sharing the stories with, because like not everybody's going to have sort of like access to these stories. So I think it really does depend on this, and it depends on what you do with your stories. Okay, so that's how I see it. But yeah.
And the next question comes from Gail. You mentioned Gail Leatherby, who's at Plymouth University, and you talked about the mentor that she has been for you in terms of biography, but also for a lot of the sociologists as well. And at the university since about 2015 or so. So Gail's been wonderful support to us all. And Gail wants to know if you could just tell us a bit more about your planned research. And she also says she's sorry she can't be there with you.
Yeah, that's okay. I had a first day again on Friday. Yeah. Okay, so right. So the student stories is one aspect of the research that I want to do. I'm actually trying to finish off another paper on my experience in the rave culture in the 1990s. I mean, listen, I don't drink, so there's nothing dodgy like that. But no, it's more of my experience of being a Black woman in the rave culture, because in some raves, it was just me one. So like just kind of looking at people's responses to it, how I responded to their responses and stuff. So that's that. So I want to do these two big projects. Later, we've also, my cousin Sarah has also been involved in this. We did an autobiography conference earlier on in the year about health and illness in sociology, and Sarah did a paper on being a breast cancer nurse, and then I did one on having TTP. This is how I know Femi. This is how I know Fala. But having thrombotic thrombocytopenia purpura. So I think down the line we will definitely write a paper on our experiences of being a healthcare provider and also being a patient in the NHS. So yeah.
So my next two questions, I'm going to try to wrap them together, and I apologise if I misrepresent what you're saying. So Lily Albrington wants to know really about, obviously autobiography is about self-expression and it can be quite exposing as well. So she wants to know how you sort of provide that space to share your stories. And then Andrew King also wants to know if there's any techniques that you could share with others.
Okay, so Lily was actually another one. She was in your class, wasn't she? Yeah, so basically, I mean, if you remember, I think we had that conversation, didn't we? When we were doing autobiography, and then we looked at what the method was, but then we also had that conversation about, okay, well, what would you like to talk about? And then, people shared what their ideas were, and that's how I would do it in another context. I'd say, look, what would you like to talk about? Okay, and then maybe we can think about adding this theory to it, that theory to it. So there is that aspect of it. And what was the other bit of your question?
Just any sort of techniques in common that you can share.
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to my point that I made with Pretty, listen to what people have to say. So listen, I mean, also give feedback, just say, give some feedback in terms of, what people are talking about, structure, etc. And then also think about, like, in sociology, what is the relevant theory, or what is in English, what is kind of like, the relevant literature that you would need to look at. So that's how I'll do that. And again, I'm quite happy to talk to you, have a little conversation with you about that.
Okay, thank you. I'm mindful of time. I'm also mindful there's a couple of people in the audience had some questions, but I'm asking if you could please stay for the celebration bit, and maybe, I know this is going to be very popular, but you can questions. There are some other questions coming in the chat as well, particularly around music, how music shapes your stories. And I know that when Jane first gave her introduction, there was music, so we know that music is really, we know that music is really important in your life. So I can let you have that question. But now I'd like to just to take the opportunity just to thank Louise and to congratulate her again for her wonderful, inspiring lecture, and to welcome her to the professoriate as well. There's not very many of us, so it's really nice to have you join the club. And as I was saying, there's now we'd like to further to celebrate Louise. We're going to be having drinks reception in the Heritage Gallery. So if you could make your way to the Heritage Gallery, and to thank all, there's over 50 people which joined. I'd like to thank everybody who joined online. And I'd like to thank you, everybody, for taking the time out to come today to celebrate Louise. Thank you.